Morning from the kitchen, folks. Today I'm going to be making some pineapple and hops wine. So the key ingredients are 4 pineapples, which I've got for the bargain price of 30p each. Being a Yorkshireman, I couldn't resist that. So I need to begin by preparing my pineapples, which involves using my big chopper. So the top comes off, bottom comes off, and then it's just a case of going down the side as close to the surface as possible to take off the rough, scaly skin. And try not to lose too much flesh. Once the outside has been broadly descaled, you've got to cut around the core here. So I'm just going to go down, 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 down and around. So I've got 4 nice pieces just here. I'm now going to chop those pieces into smaller pieces, basically pineapple chunks. And they're going to go in my blender. And it's full of juice and flavour, the pineapple. It's a very, very fermentable fruit, extremely fleshy and extremely tasty. And all my rubbish goes into this bucket. This will be full at the end, and that just becomes compost for my garden. So I've got my pineapple in my blender, and I'm just going to add to that some spring water. About just under halfway up. And now the noisy bit. What I'm left with is a rather lovely pineapple puree, and I'm simply going to pour that into this clean plastic water bottle. I've just emptied this of water, so I know it's sterile. Spring water this was in there. Now I've got to repeat the process 3 more times. So the net result of my endeavours is a lot of organic material for the garden and a very nice looking, almost 5 litres of pineapple puree with water. Now, there's a lot of air in this because it's been blended, and this is going to separate into stratified layers. I'm going to get the liquid at the bottom and I'm going to get the foam on top, and it will compress as the air releases. So I need to now leave this overnight. So I'm just simply going to put the lid on, and I'm going to pop this somewhere dark and cool, which is the larder, just down here. And I'm going to come back to this tomorrow. So I'll see you then, folks. Good morning from the kitchen, folks. I'm back again with the pineapple and hops wine that I'm making. And so this is the pineapple from yesterday. And as you can see, it's now separated into 2 distinct layers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to siphon off this bottom layer of liquid, and then I'm going to gently push this top layer through a sieve. So I'm going to get some of this matter, but not too much of it. But nothing goes to waste, because whatever's left here actually is going to go in a sweet and sour sauce. So this is actually quite a good zero waste recipe. So before I do that, I'm going to move over to the hob, and I've got 5 tea bags in this pot, and I'm going to make a strong tea, and I'm going to add to that tea 25 grams of Cascade hops. So this is in pellet form, and this is where I'm going to get my hop flavour from. So I'm going to add into my tea bags and hops some spring water, ignition, and I'm going to let that come to a simmer, and I want this to simmer for 20 minutes. So in here I've got some spring water which I've warmed up in the microwave just for 20 seconds, just so it's not cold. I'm going to add to that a little bit of this funky pineapple ale yeast. Now it is ale yeast, but it is funky pineapple, and it's meant to impart those sorts of flavours, so I thought it might be appropriate. I'm probably going to use about half of what's in here. And then I'm going to use Lalvin champagne sparkling wine and cider yeast as actually the main yeast, because this will give it a higher ABV, it's got a higher tolerance. So I'm going to put a flat teaspoon of the Lalvin yeast into the water, and then I'm going to add about half of the amount that's in this jar here. And then to that, I'm going to add a heaped teaspoon of Young's yeast nutrient. And I'm going to leave this now for the yeast to activate. Just going back to the tea, you can see that the hop pellets have now melted and it's beginning to steam very gradually. So it's time to extract my pineapple juice. So I'm just pushing the siphoning tube through the thicker matter, and I've clipped it in place with a clip at the top. So of course the fun bit. I've got a plug of pineapple matter which is not going to come through the tap, so I'm going to need to remove the tap, but then it should hopefully work. Fingers crossed. There we go. Disaster averted. So what I hadn't reckoned on is that there was actually a heavy layer of sediment at the bottom that wasn't visible because of the ridges in the plastic. So I'd shoved this right to the bottom, not realising that. Anyway, I don't mind. I'm just going to siphon as is now. But the key thing is that I get all this nice liquid off. It looks really syrupy. Meanwhile on the ring, the hop tea has come to a simmer. So I'm just going to start to press the tea bags a bit to get some of those tannin flavours out of them. Okay, the siphoning has stopped. I must have a blockage in this end of the pipe, so I'm just going to have to push the rest of this through a sieve now. So I've got my sieve in place on my funnel into my demijohn, and now in goes the gunk. And then when it starts to slow down going in, I'm going to use my spoon to just gently persuade it. I'm not trying to push it through, I'm just trying to get out liquid. I want some solid matter left in the sieve, basically. So I've got quite a bit of this to do. It's going to take a while, so I'm just going to come back to you when I've finished it. Right, so here's my hop tea. It's completely done, and what I want to do now is just squeeze these tea bags and remove them. So the tea itself, which has got the hops in it, I'm going to pour through this strainer into my demijohn. It's a bit of a messy job, but you can see the strainer works well in catching the actual hop particles. So again, it's just a bit of a waiting game while I wait for the liquid to filter through. So this has now been stood for about 30 minutes, and already we can begin to see that there is some separation in the layers. We've got more brown colours here where the hop tea has gone in, pineapple juice and then sediment. I'm hoping that that sediment will concentrate down a bit more. But now I need to top this demijohn up with a sugar water solution. So I've got a nice big bag of brew sugar here. This should last me for a good few brews. I need to take 1 kilo out of this. So that's what 1 kilo of brewing sugar looks like. Now I'm going to half fill this saucepan with spring water. I'm just going to let the water get through the sugar. It's very fine sugar, the brewing sugar, much finer than normal granulated sugar. So the brewing sugar is supposed to give a cleaner final taste. And I want the water to warm up and melt the sugar completely. So before I add the brew sugar, I'm just going to give it a little bit of a swish around to try and get those layers mixing together a bit more. So before I go any further, I'm just going to add into the wine must some Harris Pure Brew. And what I need to add into this is 1/4 of one of these tablets. So I've crushed one up and I'm going to use 1/4 of that amount in this teaspoon, which I'll have to do approximately. And then I'm going to use 1/4 of a teaspoon of this. And what this does is it takes away off flavours from the wine. It removes that homebrewy taste, or in theory that's what's supposed to happen. This also feeds the yeast. So I've just dropped those through the funnel and they're floating on top. I'm going to give them a little mix in. Smells very hoppy. Okay, now I'm going to add the sugar solution. So this is a very full and messy demijohn. I need to pour some of this out now into the hydrometer tube. And that's made a little bit of space in the top, which will mean the yeast solution can then fit in. So here's my yeast. I'm just giving it a little stir, mix it all together. And again, using my funnel, I'm going to add that in. And that's filled the demijohn nicely. So here's my blow-off pipe, so that's all sealed in. And I'm just going to rinse the demijohn because it's a bit sticky. And now I've got the temperature correct at 20 degrees. I'm starting off with an original gravity of 1.080, 1080. So just a 6 hour later update with the pineapple and hops. The blow-off pipe is doing a tremendous job. Fermentation's happening, it's got a nice krausen. And so far so good. So I shall report back in a few weeks' time when fermentation has come to a slow or a stop. Morning from the kitchen, folks. It's pineapple and hops wine clearing day. So here it is. It's been fermenting away nicely for 2 weeks, but it's really slowed down and actually stopped completely about 2 days ago. I've left it to see if anything else happened, and it hasn't, so today I'm going to be clearing it with finings. So it's bung out, siphoning tube in. I'm holding the tube in place with a clip, and I've got it just above the sediment or the trub there at the bottom. I'll get a little bit, but it's no problem. So now the fun bit. Smell the hops. So it's a very hoppy smell and a fairly clear liquid, in all honesty. I've got some high hopes for this. I'm just going to have a little nifter because I'm curious. I love the smell. Wow, that's dry. The pineapple flavour is really subtle. It's kind of like a round edge. It tastes like really dry white wine, but it smells like hops. But the taste of the hops isn't that apparent. It's nice, I like it. I'm using ClearIt wine finings from Young's. It's a 2-step process, a bit of bottle A and a bit of bottle B an hour later. So in goes a bit of bottle A. About a teaspoon equivalent. We're getting a bit of trub through now, but now we've got the bubbles, and that means that siphoning is over. So I'm going to back pour this so I don't bring any more bits of trubby sediment through. Back into the demijohn. I've done quite well in the amount that I've got there. So I need to make sure that the finings have mixed properly, so I'm just going to put the lid on this for a second. I'm just going to give it a little mix around. That's enough. Okay, I'm just going to put the lid on loosely, and I'm now going to leave this for an hour before then adding finings B. So I'll catch you in an hour. Okay folks, an hour has passed. It's now time to pour this back into the original demijohn and add finings B. I'm just going to pour it roughly like this because I'm not straining it off the sediment anymore. So it's just going straight through a funnel. Really smells great. The hoppiness is fantastic. So finings B, I used the same amount as I did finings A, which is roughly a teaspoon-ish. Okay, that was quite easy, wasn't it? So now I'm going to leave this for a few days and see if it settles. I'm hoping that the sediment will be clawed to the bottom by the finings and that I'll get a clear wine, but only time will tell. So I'll see you in a few days' time. Good morning from the kitchen, folks. It's Piner Hops Wine bottling day. Let's have a look at it. See how beautiful and clear that now is. It's been 10 days since I cleared it, and it came down in very, very, very slow layers, and I've just left it and left it. Now look at that. Look how you can see my garden through it. Absolutely beautiful colour. I hope the taste and the flavour will be the same. So I've got my bottles and my hydrometer in the sink. I've got everything sterilised. I need to put 3 carbonation drops in each of the 750ml bottles and 1.5 carbonation drops in my 375ml bottles. All of these bottles are recycled, either Belgian beer bottles or wine, Prosecco, Champagne type bottles. So I get the bung out. I'm going to pop the siphoning tube in. I'm holding the tube in place with a tube clip. You can see that the bottom of the tube is in the sediment, but don't worry about that because the first bit that comes out is going into the hydrometer jar. So now that fun bit. We get the sediment a bit through first into the hydrometer jar. It smells so hoppy. I'm really looking forward to this one actually. Now let's start the bottling. I should comfortably get the equivalent of 5 750ml bottles here. I might get a little bit more actually. There's much less sediment overall than what I expected, considering that I started with fruit and not with juice. And there we go, that was perfect actually. I got my bottles filled. I just put the end of the tube into this jug to see how much more came out, and then the bubbles appeared in the tube. So that's just absolutely perfectly done. I've got the wine in the bottles, now I need to add the bungs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's getting a bit painful now. And 6, so that's all bungs in. Now I've got carbonation drops in the bottle. Carbonation causes a secondary fermentation in the bottle, which means that the drops release a bit of sugar, which the yeast will eat. It will create more alcohol, very slightly more alcohol, but what it will do is create CO2. The CO2 is what makes this a sparkling wine. So now I need to hold these bungs in place. And in order to do that, I use cages. Now some of these cages are recycled, some are bought. They usually last for about 4 uses before they break. But they work very well. And that's 1 done. And finally number 6. I need to give my bottles a rinse now because they've got sticky wine residue on the outside. I need to take the final gravity of my wine now to work out the alcohol by volume. I've just dropped the hydrometer into the flask, and I'm very pleased to tell you that the final gravity for this is 0.990. I now need to work out what the alcohol by volume is by looking at the original gravity and the final gravity. So if I take the original gravity of 1.080 and I deduct the final gravity of 0.990, that gives me a figure of 0.09. If I then multiply this figure by 131.25, that tells me that my final alcohol by volume is, drumroll please, 11.8%. That is superb. That is a great strength for a dry white wine. I'm going to say 12% because after the secondary carbonation has kicked in a little bit, that's going to go up a little bit anyway. Let's just say 12% and be very, very, very happy with that. Big thumbs up. Now I've just got to print out my labels. So I'm just adding the labels onto the dried bottles. And here we have it. All of the bottles are now nicely done and labelled. The wines are now on the conditioning shelves where they'll remain for 2 weeks. These are simply temperature controlled shelves. I've got a thermostat down there which is connected to this plug, and when the temperature drops below 19.5 it turns on that thin radiator behind the shelves, and when the temperature reaches 20.5 it turns the radiator off. So that keeps these at an optimal temperature for conditioning and for secondary fermentation to happen. So I should be expecting something which is sparkling in 2 weeks' time. So I'll be back then with the next film for the tasting. Good evening from the kitchen, folks. It's Pineapple and Hops Sparkling Wine opening night. Excited, but I don't know if it's going to be fizzy or not. I'm just looking at the bung and it's barely raised, and sometimes you get a little couple of mils and you can see that there's some pressure in there, and I'm not seeing that with this one. Hopefully I'll be surprised though pleasantly, but let's see. So I'm looking for some clarity to it. I want a nice smell, a good taste and a bit of a sparkle. I'm not bothered if it's not fizzy, but I'd like a little sparkle at least, just something to sort of tickle your tongue. So let's see what happens. Is it going to pop? No, it ain't going to pop. So it's not sparkling. So I think what I've probably done... Oh, is it sparkling? We could say that there's some effervescence, maybe. Actually a really mild sparkle, but wow, that is nice. I should have gone through it in all the stages really. So first of all, you get that really hoppy smell, a bit like elderflower. It really hits you and it's delicious. Great smell. Wonderful taste. It's a dry white wine. It's a really good dry white wine. Hops work so well in wine. Pineapple works well in wine. Hops and pineapple together, winner winner. It's really very nice. It's one I would make again, and it's one I would recommend. So cheers folks. I haven't got the sparkle that I wanted. I've got a delicate effervescence, but I've got a very, very delicious dry white wine. So bottoms up and down the hatch and all that malarkey. Prost. The film that you've just watched is a Moss Home and Garden production. You can find more by going to www.mosshomeandgarden.co.uk. I'd just like to say thank you very much for supporting my YouTube channel and for watching my films. It really is very much appreciated. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to my YouTube channel in order to receive future updates about the home and garden films which I upload. You can find my YouTube channel by going to www.mosshomeandgarden.co.uk. Please click on the red subscribe button. When you've done that, a little bell will appear. If you press that also, then you'll get future updates about the films which I upload. If you like my films, if you like my style of filming, then you might also like my travel channel, which you will find by going to youtube.com/Stuart Moss or type in If you'd like to get Moss Home and Garden updates on Facebook, then please open Facebook and do a search for Moss Home and Garden, and you will find the page. If you like the page, then you will get future updates on there. And if you'd like to connect on Instagram for home, garden and travel photography, as well as some stories, then my username is StuMoss, STUMOSS. If you'd like to connect on Twitter, then my username is @StuartMoss. And if you'd like to contact me about film usage or any other issue, please just email me on stewmosshomegarden@gmail.com. Once again, thank you very much for supporting my channel, for watching my films. I do appreciate it. I'd just like you all to have a great day.